In the wake of the school shooting in Perry, Iowa, lawmakers are looking at ways to make Iowa schools safer. One bill would make it easier to arm school staff members and require larger districts to have school resource officers.
WGEM's Capitol reporter Connor Hendricks explains the proposal ahead of a hearing on Monday.
The Students First Safety Act is set to go before a House subcommittee Monday. It requires larger districts in the state to hire either a private school security officer or a school resource officer. It also gives funding for districts to hire them. Another proposal in the bill would make it easier for school staff members to carry a firearm at school. Richard Rogers with the Iowa Firearms Coalition says armed staffers would reduce response times in the event of an active shooter.
If there is, and it's a rare occurrence, a mass shooting in a school, the only way to keep the victim count to a single-digit level is to have an immediate response, preferably within the first 30 seconds.
Rogers says there are training requirements for educators who wish to carry.
This would require initial training on the law, as well as firearms handling and how to respond to force, emergency medical training and so on, and then quarterly and annual reviews.
Some Iowa schools are already arming educators. The day after the shooting at Perry High School last month, Siouxland Christian School announced that they'd allow some staffers to carry. The school was able to get coverage from their insurance company on the policy, but other insurance companies have balked at covering other districts considering arming staff. Melissa Peterson from the Iowa State Education Association says firearms in the schoolhouse is a risky idea.
Accidents always happen when you're around students, regardless of what age they might be. And we think that, quite frankly, the stakes are just too high. We should not take the risk. More firearms does not equal more safety.
Peterson says school resource officers can negatively impact the learning environment for students who have adverse relationships or perceptions of law enforcement. Some school districts have done away with SROs for that reason. From the Iowa Capitol Bureau, I'm Connor Hendricks reporting.